I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Everyone, I'm excited to have my friends Mike and Iris of Movies in 30 Minutes on the program for the first time. I got to be on their show, Movies in 30 Minutes, where we talked about Polite Society. That was a great movie. That was a great episode. Thank you again for having me. And now you're returning the favor by being on my show to talk about two pinnacles of cinema, two absolute classics of the film arts. We're talking about PCU and Soul Man. But before we get into that, introductions. Mike, Iris, let's take a second to get to know you and your podcast.
Iris, you want to go? Or you want me to?
Go for it, Mike.
So Iris and I have been podcasting together for 10, 11, 12 years now, Iris. Is that correct?
Yeah,
We've done different shows in that time frame. And just recently, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, decided to kickstart another podcast called Movies in 30 Minutes. So basically, we do exactly what you do, Antonio. We talk about film, only we keep it under 30 minutes or less, unless we have a guest on. In your case, you were on the Polite Society episode. That went a little bit longer. It's because you got a third voice in the studio, right? So that's going to go a little bit longer. But generally, it's 30 minutes and no more. And we squeeze a lot of information, I think, in that 30 minutes, some of it educated, some of it not educated, because we're just goofy podcasters.
Yes,
Anything
we
to
are.
add, Iris?
No, it's pretty much a lots of fun. And like Mike said, we've been together for a good... He's my podcast husband. That's what I call him. That's how long we've been together.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I have a podcast husband too. His name's Justin, and we do the Back to the Balcony show together. So the Siskel and Ebert podcast. But no, this is a lot of fun. I like to have guests on every week. It's how the show is now. It started off with me just doing reviews. And what I liked about you guys when I first started seeing you on Instagram was the idea of keeping it to 30 minutes, because that's one of the disciplines that I gave myself a long time ago, is I try to not let this show go over an hour. And there's some cinema podcasts that I absolutely love, but then they'll have like a 2 or 3 hour episode. I'm like, guys, halfway through it, you're not even talking about the movie anymore. It's just banter. Let's get back to the movie. So I thought that I was doing the world a favor by doing it in 58 minutes, and here you guys come along and do it in 30. So
yeah, we're very much, once I hit that record button, play a little bit of music, we just get right into it. There's no fooling around, and not that we're a super serious podcast, because we're not. We're just doing this for the fun of it. But
no.
we like to get to the point, because when you only have 30 minutes to talk about, 2.5, 3 hour movie, you gotta move at a fast pace, and we're templatized because of that. But we're not scripted. So there's a difference between being templatized and scripted. So, that's the way we like doing it. And we don't edit a thing. I hit record, I have a soundboard, and as you can attest to, what we recorded, that's what you heard if you listen back to that episode. So
I'm pretty much the same way until I started doing video. And so now I do like touch the camera and stuff like that to make sure whoever's speaking is speaking. But the less post-production work, the more sanity you maintain, right? When you start like obsessing over, oh, I don't like the way I said that, just let it go, right? Like, people understand you're human. Not every word has to be enunciated correctly unless you're gifted like me. And you can
right.
just do it.
You're gifted in more ways than one. Yeah, there was a time when I would edit everything. I mean, did it for years. And then we took a nice break, and I said, I want to come back to this, but I absolutely don't want to edit anything. Therefore, I bought the proper equipment, and that's the direction that we're moving in now. We just hit record and basically release it immediately afterwards.
So I do have a question for you too. So as I've been listening to your show and following all the movies that you're doing on your Instagram, there's a very, very randomness to how you're picking your movies. Because at first I thought I had it pegged. I'm like, okay, well, they like these particular types of movies and that's what they're going to go with. And then you just come out of left field. And like the last 4 have been just completely different. So what is your process of how you choose the movies that you're picking for your episodes every week?
We don't have a process. We literally do not.
Is it
we
like
do not
darts?
have a process. So we're going to record next week. We record twice a month, 2 episodes per session. Right now we have 2 movies lined up. We don't have nothing lined up beyond that. But by the time we sit down to record a week from today, today's Saturday, I will choose another movie for that episode, and I will hit Iris up and ask her to choose a movie as well. So we really have no process, and it's whatever we want to watch.
I like it. Since there's 2 of you,
We are like the sloppiest of all podcasts out there.
I love it.
Not really. What I like to do though is I like to pick movies that I'm pretty sure Mike has never seen
That's a good move.
and make him watch it.
So Polite Society was your pick, Iris?
No, actually, it wasn't.
That was mine. That was my pick. Yeah.
Wow, you guys are so mystical. I can't understand what's going on here. It's fantastic.
Like the next couple episodes are we're gonna watch X. The what's his
The
name?
Ty
Iris?
West?
The guy I don't like. Ty West. Yeah, and then Iris, you're following up with some Irish movie or something after that.
English movie, Living.
Living. All right.
Oh,
So
I haven't seen that
quite
one. So.
different, but beyond that, we don't know what we're gonna watch. I'm thinking some Doris Wishman, maybe some Ed Wood,
Yeah.
something like that, because we need to dive into the stinky garbage every now and then.
Well, thinking of stinky garbage, not really these films, but I'm not going to take the blame for this one. I sent Mike a list of films and double features to talk about, and this is the one that he picked because it seemed, pretty off the beaten path for some of the things that I've been doing on the show. I've wanted to do these films for a long time. No one ever picks it, and there's a reason why. The first film we're going to talk about in this crazy college movie double feature, right, is 1986's Soul Man, directed by Steve Miner, starring C. Thomas Howell. It is a very touchy subject in the world today. It was a very touchy subject when it came out in 1986. And the question I had, because both Mike and I talked off camera, that he had seen this movie in the theater when it came out, but had very little memories of it and how it affected him. And then I saw this in the mid-90s when I was a teenager, just on some cable channels. Like, is this really a movie? Is this real? Like, even in the mid-90s, I'm like, they made this? So I wanted to know how I was going to feel viscerally after rewatching it, 20-something years later in the environment that we're in. And does it live up to all the negative hype and press that it got when it came out? And I'm going to go even deeper. I got on Letterboxd, right, to see how many people have logged this movie. Lots of people have logged this movie, but they don't rate it with stars. They don't want to give an opinion of what they really thought of the movie because they don't want any kind of backlash, I guess, from other people in that community. So you see lots of reviews and you see lots of films logged under this, but very actual stars and ratings. I thought that was really interesting. And it kind of goes back to the whole idea of like, is this movie that dangerous to talk about? Is this movie that dangerous to have an opinion on? And so that's why I'm excited to talk about it today. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to start with you, Iris. What was your experience with this movie? Do you have a history with it?
Yes, I do. So this movie I got to watch in the drive-in way back when, because Mike and I are probably the oldest podcasters in the world. When I watched it the first time, to me, person of color, not a big deal.
Right.
It really, really was not. Yeah, because I'm a little brown. Thank you very much. When I watched it, it was really no big deal. But again, I grew up watching movies, older movies, where blackface was a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really wasn't like, oh my God, we can't do that. It
Iris
wasn't
just
really
had
a
her
big deal.
73rd birthday, by the way.
I did. No, but the old Lucy stuff where
Yeah.
they would get blackface and stuff like that. Grow up watching all that stuff. So it wasn't a big deal to me, and really didn't know that blackface was really offensive to anyone until I was in more into the adult world.
Mhm.
So, and to me, now watching it again, I watched the movie. I didn't have any different feelings. Um, it was basically the same, like, it's cute and funny, but I wasn't interested in the movie because it was blackface. I was just not interested in the movie because it's really not that entertaining.
But
Yeah.
let's be clear. It's not blackface. It's really not
No,
blackface.
and it's not. He took pills to
He took tanning
get
pills.
more melanin.
I mean,
So
if you define blackface, it's where would that come from? Hollywood at one time lacked black actors and actresses. Therefore, white people filled in where their faces were actually painted black, which
Mhm.
was normal for the time. Now
Yeah.
it's a kick in the nuts, of course, and that's not something that you see anymore. In fact, it's not something you see hardly at all, even like in reruns of old movies on TV. So they just don't show that stuff.
Or if they do it with a disclaimer, like all of the Disney stuff these days. They'll
That's
say,
correct.
hey, there's representations from a different time. We're just letting you know that this could be triggering, but we also. And the same thing with Gone with the Wind. When I watched Gone with the Wind on HBO, there was like a 20-minute kind of content warning and explanation. Like, we're apologizing for this film before you watch it. Which, okay, that's fine. I get why they have to do that in these current days, but also, I just want to watch the movie. Let me be my own judge of how it's going to affect me. It's kind of where I come from. See, for me, like, I guess what made me uncomfortable when I was younger is that it just felt wrong. But that was on the surface, right? Like, you looked at the poster of the movie or the VHS cover, it's like, ugh. C. Thomas Howell's got jerry curl and dark skin. I'm not exactly sure if I should be laughing at this. And then actually watching the movie, it's got a lot of funny moments, but you ask yourself, am I okay to laugh at these based on the content? So when I rewatched the film, and I've watched it twice for this episode because I wanted to make sure that my initial reaction just wasn't based off of, let's say, a social prejudice of things that seem uncomfortable racially like this. Where this movie gets it right is this movie gets it right because it was telling a message. It was trying to tell a positive story. It was trying to really say that racism exists, but it makes the mistake of thinking that modern America was going to be okay with this journey being through the eyes of a white man in dark skin. That was where I had the issue with. But I did not once feel like this movie was offensive to the culture. I think the offensive part was, okay, we're really overdoing it of trying to be too sympathetic to the idea that this is a white man who has to go through the black man's struggles. I appreciate that, but then at the same time, it's a slapstick 80s kind of sex comedy. So your message and your content are a little uneven. And I think the right pair of eyes will see through that, but the wrong pair of eyes will just see it for its face value and call it racist, call it inappropriate, call it appropriation.
Yeah, there's always going to be those sets of people who do that. Antonio, where did you end up landing on after the second viewing? Were you okay to laugh at it? Because it's got some funny bits.
It's got some funny bits, and this might be a hot take. I am less offended by this movie than I am when I went back and rewatched some of the John Hughes movies. Things like
Right.
16 Candles, or let's say Revenge of the Nerds. Like, I find more socially problematic issues with films like that, which in some circles are still considered socially acceptable, yet this film still has such a heavy stigma behind it because of what it is. But the way it tells its story and the characters and just the humor in it, I feel like they really did the best they could to be respectful to the African American community, but people didn't want to sit through the movie to get that message. They were just going to immediately judge it based off of the cover and based off of the initial concept. So
Could you imagine pitching this idea to the studio and
yeah,
like what
these
did it
days.
take to actually get made?
Well, and it's interesting because, like, the whole Tropic Thunder thing, right? Where,
Oh, yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., the African American community actually kind of like rallied behind that performance. It was satirical, it was social commentary, it was kind of, taking the piss on Hollywood and taking the piss on. We didn't quite have woke culture yet, but it was coming. And it's looked at very differently now, and that was only 11, 12 years ago. So it's an interesting thing how much as that's changed. This is 1986. This is before the PC movement, which we'll talk about in our next movie. And even then, like, the NAACP was like rallying against this movie before it even came out. There's another movie, not to get off on a tangent, but Samuel Fuller made a movie called White Dog back in like 1980, 81, about a woman who adopts a white German shepherd that attacks people of color. And then she takes him to a black dog handler who tries to deprogram the dog because he's grew up being attacked by dogs that were trained to attack people of color. It's a movie about redemption, right? But there were groups that like, okay, we don't even want this movie to come out. So they didn't release it, and it was lost for years. I feel like this is kind of the same thing, just not as serious. Like, it's a comedy, and maybe that is why, like, they're trying to smooth the message by making it a comedy and not like a drama. But I don't think that did it any favors in public opinion.
Yeah, I was going to ask what genre of film it was, but you said it wasn't a comedy. Therefore, that would be tough to chew on for sure. Just simply because, like, look, somebody trained an animal to attack black people.
Yeah, which apparently was really a thing. Like, that wasn't made up just for the movie. I want to talk about C. Thomas Howell and his performance in this. It's a risky move, and the fact that it was turned down by multiple stars of the day, like John Cusack and Rob Lowe. Like, this went through every single, male heartthrob of the 1980s, and he was like number 10 on the list, and he's the one that said yes finally, because he thought the script was funny and he saw the message in it. What do you think about his representation and maybe how he performs his journey and the lessons that he learns? How do we feel about that?
So if I might, personally, I thought it was pretty good because first of all, he's trying to be the cool, slick black dude, and he totally bombs.
Yeah, he does.
He totally bombs it. He was, and then favorite scene when they go to the gym to play basketball.
Oh, 100%.
And he sucks. But then again, here we are showing what the movie is really about. It's about that stereotypical thing that we put on the African American community,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're all athletes, they're all super basketball players. The females that wanted to bed him because they wanted the experience,
Right?
right? I mean,
Only to be disappointed later.
right? So it was interesting to watch, but he himself, the kid was good. He was funny, and that's one thing about him is he delivered those funny moments exactly how they needed to be delivered, and I think he really did well. And had it been somebody different that was maybe a little uncomfortable with what they were doing, I don't think it would have worked as well.
I agree. This role takes commitment, right? Like, you can't backpedal it or else you actually do feel like you are trying to sanitize your performance to not offend anybody. And him just kind of just playing it as he would play it,
As a white guy.
Yeah, it was a white guy, but he's just playing it as a role. And there are a few moments where they go into like these like kind of fantasy cutaways where he does go into a more stereotype thing. Like, Leslie Nielsen's the dad of this girl who he goes to dinner
right.
with. And you see how he looks from his point of view. And in his point of view, he's a pimp. He's dressed in pimp, and he's he's talking jive, but that's not the character. That is this racist man's perception of him when he sees him at the table. Yet whenever I see commentary about this movie, they always show that clip as if this is the movie. It's just C. Thomas Howell doing jive talk and playing a black pimp. That's not it at all. And I was almost brainwashed to think that's what it was from all these years of watching YouTube videos about this movie.
It's pretty normal that these things are taken out of context.
100%.
You know, to achieve whatever whoever took that out of the context, they wanted to achieve a certain something. So that's how they do it. And they still do it to this very day. I thought he was great in the role. I thought he was absolutely terrific. I think that, and I could be wrong because I don't have the inside information, but I think this is a role that if you're white, and for the sake of saying we'll say blackface, and you're in blackface, you can't bring the true sort of represent a mimic of a black man to the screen. You have to play it as a white guy trying to be a black guy, but without having that personality.
Right.
Does that make any sense at all?
No, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. And the way that his female lead, Rae-Dawn Chong, Tommy Chong's daughter, acts opposite him, I think actually complements that message that you're talking about, because she looks at him as another African American, but also she looks at him as an intellectual, because the whole point of how he has to get into college because his dad goes through a midlife crisis, which is a whole other social commentary to talk about right now. Like this whole idea that everyone needs therapy and everyone's going through a midlife crisis, and his dad, who's this rich guy who could send him to school, he goes to a therapist who's having a midlife crisis. Therefore, the therapist's midlife crisis becomes all of his patients' midlife crisis. I think that's an excellent commentary on the cult of psychology sometimes. I'm not saying that it's not, important for some people, but that's definitely a great social commentary to make apart from the racial stuff. So the dad doesn't pay for his school, so he has to find a way to get into Harvard on his own. So he gets a scholarship that's only for black people. And he takes these tanning pills. In his mind, no one else has gotten the scholarship, so he's not stealing it from everybody. They're very careful about trying to paint that picture on it, and that's how he ends up in Harvard. And
that's a nice little hook that comes back around.
It does, because the girl that he falls in love with could have had that scholarship.
Right. But it was taken away by him, unbeknownst to him. I found it funny, so clearly this guy's white.
Yeah.
All right. He's not black at all, and it's pretty obvious. He has no black features whatsoever. Then he takes interest in an African-American student, Rae-Dawn Chong, who could be white as well, because she has absolutely no black features. They picked the perfect girl to play, against him.
It's interesting too, because, they talk about how, I think Ari Gross, who plays his best friend, who I love his character. He's great. He's in House 2, one of my favorite shitty movies of all time.
Oh, you like House 2?
I love House 2. I think it's better than House 1 in my opinion, but that's a different podcast.
I think Steve Miner directed both those.
Steve Miner directed House in this one, absolutely. What I like about the character of his friend, played by Ari Gross, is that he is the one that kind of helps safely deliver the racial context of the day. So he says, hey man, actually it's pretty cool that you're black. This is the decade of Bill Cosby, right? Bill Cosby's cool, so people are going to accept you. All right, that did not age well, but the irony of it actually makes it funnier, in my opinion.
I agree. Yeah.
Where it's like we were kind of blindsided by the entertainment industry in the 80s to think that all black people were Bill Cosby and basketball players and stuff like that were successful. And then if you weren't on TV, or if you weren't a basketball player, if you weren't a football player, then you were a gang member or a drug dealer. Like that's really how that worked for me as a kid. When I'd see TV, I'd see one or the other, and that was it. You didn't see the middle class. You didn't see the struggling families that would be wanting a scholarship like this. That's where I think this movie actually does do a good job of saying, hey, this is another social class of African Americans that you are not familiar with because you're not seeing them on TV, and we're showing their struggle as well. I'm like, did fucking Soul Man just like teach me another lesson about 80s African American culture that I didn't know about?
Yes, it did.
It did. It did.
Damn
I mean,
it.
if you didn't watch Good Times or
Jeffersons.
maybe some of the
Jeffersons,
Jeffersons or the Red Fox one, Sanford and Son,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't know about that middle class, right?
Right.
You would only see like what was it?
Okay, so the Jeffersons was a bad choice for me. They were upper class.
Well, they were upper class, but
Yeah.
you still had Florence and other people that were the middle class that were serving the higher,
Yes.
middle class, but they were still there. It was still something that was there. Um, and then, of course, you get the popularity of shows of the inclusion of a black person, but the Huxtables, of course,
Mhm.
the Cosbys, but then the you still have that white savior, right? A different strokes.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
What Iris is saying is there's always a smart black kid in all these things.
Yeah. There was
They're
a
they're
Carlton.
They're all
Yeah,
stereotypes.
there's always that kind of character with that.
They all wear glasses. They dress nice. They have wool sweaters.
Well, so this movie kind of has that character too, guys. We didn't mention that this movie features James Earl Jones as
That's
one of the
right.
law
God, I
professors.
love him.
And he's so good in this movie. And I forgot that he was in it. And the first thing I did is like when he popped up, I'm like, what are you doing in Soul Man? And then you kind of understand that like he is that character where you kind of think, all right, is this the, let's say, token black man that doesn't want to come off as black? He's a Harvard law professor, right? And he doesn't care about your color and he doesn't care about your struggle. He just cares about the academia and your performance. That's how it comes off at first. But then he does throughout the movie painfully start empathizing with the struggles that C. Thomas Howell's character is going through. And even though he's not forgiving them academically, he's letting him know that I understand what you're going through, so you have to work twice as hard. Again, this is
transaction between those two characters is one of the best scenes in the whole movie because Darth Vader says to Mark, uh, now you know what it feels like to be black in America. Yeah. And he, paraphrasing this, of course, no, I don't.
Yeah.
And I that just works so well for
as
me.
we finish up on Soul Man, I just gotta say that like this movie pleasantly surprised me, and it's not a masterpiece by any means. In the end of the day, it's a dumb 80s comedy, but I think it's a dumb 80s comedy that has been poorly judged and chastised for what it appears to be on the surface. And again, I can't speak to the black experience. So watching this from a Latin American white boy experience, I was entertained by the humor and the heart and the message it was trying to do. I can forgive the things that maybe seem uncomfortable now because of, the time and how the society and culture has changed. But there's heart here. And if there wasn't heart, if it was just all laughs, I wouldn't be able to give it a pass or an appreciation that I do. But there's heart here, and I like it for that. I respect it for that.
I completely agree. I worried that it wasn't going to hold up and it would reflect that black face of Hollywood so many years ago, but it absolutely doesn't. And it is a very fun movie with a great message, a couple different great messages, that interaction between Darth Vader and Mark, right? And then there's the love tie-in between the white black guy and the black girl, which is, touching. So could this movie be remade here in 2024? That's what I'm wondering.
I knew someone was going to ask that, and like, absolutely not. But I'm not saying that it could not be remade if it was a different ethnicity or maybe a different, social identity. It could be a gender thing. I think that there is a story to tell here. It doesn't necessarily have to be the black experience. So I don't know if that's a pro or a con. It all depends on the person handling it, right?
I think the Wayans brothers need to do it.
Okay, if the Wayans brothers did it, then maybe it works. They get a pass.
Be a sequel to White Girls or White Chicks.
Any last words from you, Iris?
No, just pretty much the same. I would just be reiterating what both of you have said. This movie does have I don't want to say a lesson, but it does show you something that you don't think you're going to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what that heart that you're calling out. I think it really does have that.
Yeah. And C. Thomas Howell, if you're listening, I think you did a great job, man. Don't let the
I
haters
did
hate.
too. I did too. I really enjoyed his performance in this.
All right. So on to a film that, if you guys didn't know, this film that we're about to talk about is one of the biggest treasure troves of collection hunters. This movie is very hard to find. This movie ended up in the Disney archives. It's impossible to find streaming. I found like a ripped copy on YouTube I sent to you guys, or a different website. I can't remember, but
it's Internet Movie Database.
Internet Movie Database. That's right.
It's a good print. It's a pretty good print.
Yeah, I've had the DVD for years, but then I realized that, this has never had a Blu-ray. It probably never will. There's music licensing issues, and the fact that it's owned by a company that doesn't want to put out content like this anymore. That's why, like, if you have physical media, hold on to it. We're going to talk about 1994's PCU. Now, was this a first-time watch for anybody besides?
It was for me.
Yeah.
Not for me.
I'd never heard of it. Theater. That's one of the reasons why I chose this episode with these two films.
Nice. Iris, what was your experience with this movie?
My experience, this was another one that I watched at the movie theater, and funny enough, I was in one of the most widest place I have ever been, which was Salt Lake City, Utah.
That's where I live.
I know. So you know what I'm talking about. And I thought it was funny and hilarious, and the people that were in the movie theater with me, some of them left, and I couldn't understand why. But
some of them left or laughed?
Left.
No, left. They left. Got up and left. Did not finish watching the movie.
I have to be honest with you. I can see that happening with this film. I watched it twice.
Ooh, I'm excited to talk about this.
Not to step on your toes, Iris. I don't know if you're done or not, but I could see maybe why people would get up and leave.
Well, for me, guys, like, this movie, when I was a kid, so I was 13 when this came out, it was being marketed on TV and on MTV as this generation's Animal House. It was like the Animal House for the 90s. That's what they were trying to say. It's the crazy college film for the 90s. But where it really kind of got its, I'm going to say, popularity, but also complicated legacy is, if you grew up in the early 90s, you were at the peak of the PC movement. Politically correct language, politically correct actions, the way you dressed. What we're experiencing now these days, what they call woke culture, is like the extreme version of what politically correct things were in the early 90s. And this movie was the movie that was going to crumble it, essentially. Now, it didn't, but I think it's a really interesting... I think it's a really interesting commentary on it, though. So Mike seems to have some issues about it. So I want to hear. Let's get the evil out of you. What's?
I don't hate this movie. I really don't. I watched it twice because I felt I owed it to myself to see, like, what am I not understanding? Was it better the second time? Not really. I got to tell you, it's a little. I found it a little bit to be bland, honestly, and like you said, this is a poor man's version of Animal House. Like, how do you even come close to topping such an iconic film, right? And I don't know that that's what they were trying to do. One thing this movie has going for it, in my opinion, is Jeremy Piven of Entourage, because he's fantastic in Entourage. He's like one of my favorite characters in one of my favorite series, right? And then I realized while I was watching this, he's been Jeremy Piven in everything he's ever done.
Everything he's ever been, 100%. Like, writing the role of Ari Gold was essentially, okay, well, let's write a role where Jeremy Piven can be Jeremy Piven. That's essentially what that is.
Yeah. And on the upside, it's got a tremendous cast, I think, all very young. If I can remember, Chris Young, who hasn't done a whole lot, right? But Jon Favreau went on to obviously do bigger and better things. He was in, I think, he directed Elf. He was in Swingers, of course.
Yeah.
Jake Busey, who I was surprised to see.
It's one of his first roles.
It was, and he played a Jamaican white guy.
He played the quintessential 90s stoner, the university stoner.
Yeah. I didn't completely dislike it, but it felt a little disjointed to me. And I felt, you mentioned this soundtrack, right? Like it would be a nightmare to get all the rights to release that on a newer medium such as Blu-ray or 4K. I don't even know if they could do that. But one of the things in my head is like, why did they choose this soundtrack? Why are these pieces of music playing? Are some of them from cover bands? I wondered, right? But then George Clinton pulls up in a bus and I go, okay, music will probably get better. And it does, I think.
Yeah. What about you, Iris?
This movie I thought was loads of fun. It is disjointed. I will agree with Mike. But I thought it was loads of fun, funny. It's just making fun of all the things that as I was a young adult in my mid 20s, they were staring at these younger adults going, what's the deal with you guys? Why are you protesting this? Why are you protesting that? It's like I just didn't get it. So when I was watching this and it was making fun of all that, I thought it was hilarious. I was entertained, even though some of the stories are like, first you get this, and then you get that, and then you get this, and then you get that. It's kind of hard to keep track, but it was
And the
extremely
movie's a little
entertaining.
all over the place.
It is. It really, really is. And it's trying to be all kinds of things. It's trying to be a little
It's
bit of
trying to
Animal
encompass a
House.
lot.
Yeah, it's trying to be a little bit of Skull and Bones and maybe a little bit of some of the Yale Harvard movies that we were also getting at the same time. And then it was trying to be that cute little love story, which I really didn't get.
Yeah, it's the weakest part of the movie.
Yeah,
I
it
agree,
really
yeah.
is, isn't it? So yeah, it was a little disjointed, but some of the jokes in there were fucking hilarious. And I really, really enjoyed them. So I got some good laughs out of that.
This is one of those movies, like growing up, if it was on cable, I was watching it. So I've seen this movie, I can't even count how many times, just because if it was on, I was watching it. Now, I've had plenty of time to kind of deconstruct my thoughts on this. And this is where I think this movie is actually a piece of gold, right? This movie is where we are making the commentary of, in the early 90s, we have essentially four cultures clashing with each other. So we have like the older established conservatives, right? Those are the ones that are running the facility. They're the ones that are running the university. Jessica Walter, one of my favorite ladies of all time on film, plays President Garcia Thompson, and she's essentially like the Dean Wormer of this college, right? Now you've also got the neoconservative guys led by David Spade, who have been forced to live underground, right? So these are like the frat guys from the 60s who never grew out of the 60s that are still kind of carrying this weird, I'm not going to say neo-Nazi, but definitely very Aryan-centric fraternity together, right?
I completely forgot he was in this film.
I know. This was like a year before Tommy Boy, so he hadn't quite hit movie gold yet.
Right.
Then you have got...
very good in it, though, I have to say.
Right, 100%. He's hilarious in this. And then you've got the slacker generation, which is the slacker generation that Jeremy Piven and Jon Favreau, the metalhead guys, that's who they represent, which when a lot of people look back at the 90s, they're like, oh, the 90s was a slacker generation. We had movies about it. We had Clerks and we had the movie Slacker. Like, it was that generation of those people. But what we don't really think about is the fact that these are our three main groups existing in this university that's full of political correctness that has manifested itself into all these little groups and categories, just like today, but they're just making fun of it in 1994. You've got the wominists, the extreme feminists. You've got the cause heads who are vegan one week and then they're like against fur the next week. They're always protesting about something. And then you've got the people who are fighting for causes that they understand. The funniest joke in the movie is the guy screaming, "Free Nelson Mandela." And the dude's like, "They freed him already." Like, that is hilarious because I feel that's what so many of these cultures are, is that they're protesting shit that they don't even understand. And this movie is making fun of it in 1994.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. This is what you would call Ari Gold. This movie.
Yeah, right. But rim shot. Iris, I mean, you guys are a little bit older than me, and like I was like a teenager when this came out, so I was old enough to understand what was going on in the generation above me. Like, I'm right on the border of Gen X and millennial, right? But the people I wanted to be like were the people that were 10 years older than me, which is what this film represents. Like, what was it like seeing generations of people that you actually lived with and grew up with represented in a comical fashion in a film like this? Like, how close is it to what you experience? Is it farce? Is it satire? Or is there more truth than fiction in this?
For me, I'd have to say it was more satire.
Uh-huh.
Coming from a very Hispanic immigrant, work really hard, you do not slack off,
Right.
you do everything you can, culture, to a military culture, which is suck it up, buttercup, just keep going. It was a lot of satire, but when I would see my friends who ended up going to college and weren't starting a family because this and that, they were either all career oriented Reaganomics preppy guys and gals, or they were the slackers, the one that were like, well, I don't know if I want to go to college. I don't know if I want to go to university. I want to
I
go
just want to play
travel.
music.
I just want to play music. Or a lot of my friends, backpacks, went to Europe on a
Yeah.
one-way ticket and slept in hostels, worked in this little town for a while to have enough money to go to the next hostel, and that was their life. So I saw both sides, but to me, a lot of what I saw was more satire. And I think it was because it was funny and
Yeah.
it was, over the top. So maybe that's why I saw it more as satire.
What about you, Mike?
It's definitely over the top. So I went to 4-year university in the town in which I was born and I grew up in. So I didn't have the opportunity to live in the dorms and see any of these shenanigans play out.
Mhm.
I'm upper middle class. I came home every day. I took my studies very seriously. So I did not experience this. That's why I said earlier in the program, like, I don't know if these kind of shenanigans ever really happen. I know they do because, right, where do these things come from? They typically come from real life experiences of people making the movie. To me, it's just this silly, over the top movie that I'm just not entirely sure any college or any student would not take their education at all serious.
Right. Well, I think that's kind of the joke about it that they're trying to make, is that, Jeremy Piven is a 7-year senior, right? A year later, Tommy Boy would do the exact same thing and be a monster hit. So I think there are seedlings of at least what people were looking at of, are people just going to school now to have fun and not taking their education serious? There's a comedian named Bert Kreischer, and he was the inspiration for the Van Wilder movie. He was like the party guy, was in college for like 10 years, around the same time this takes place. So there was definitely that kind of mentality of the mid-90s with some of the people like, oh, I want to be the cool guy, and I don't want to leave college because once I'm out of college, I'm not going to be the cool guy anymore. So I think that we do see a lot of that in this. What really makes me laugh about this movie, though, is that just like Soul Man, it would be hard to make this movie today without getting a bunch of uproar, because you are really making fun of like the same groups of people, but now those groups of people have become extreme. where this is like a satirical, funny look at people who had causes that they didn't really understand, but they protested anyway. Extreme slacker culture, extreme conservatism, where that is a joke in today's climate, it's not a joke. It's reality. And so that's why another reason why I think this movie needs to be like protected because it reminds us of a time where we could joke about that kind of stuff and people didn't take themselves as seriously. And the reason why they do is because the world's a lot more serious. I get that. I'm not saying that anyone today who's fighting for what they believe in isn't right. I'm just saying that like the second we stop making jokes about shit,
I get it, man.
it's like,
I
whoa,
do.
like what are we doing? So
That when I went to university, it was a weird time in my life. I dropped out of high school because my history teacher told me he wasn't going to pass me because I was a fuck up with all A's. I just never. Can I cuss on this show?
yeah, sure.
I just didn't give a shit. So about 6 months went by, and some things happened to me in that 6-month period, and I realized that okay, I'm 18. I'm a grown ass man, and I need to straighten my life out. I actually went back to high school. I didn't get my GED. I sucked it up and went back to high school for 3 months to complete my high school education, and I think that's probably what had me taking my college career so serious because I didn't want to repeat myself
Right.
When I was in high school. So I don't want to sound like I'm Mr. Serious here with these movies. And I agree, like every piece of cinema, good or bad, I think needs what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't need to be held in high regard, but they need to be protected. They need to be digitally
like archived, like just
preserved. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was trying to think of the word preserved. And I agree with you, not only with this film, but with every film that we all love. And we all love movies for different reasons.
Right. Yeah, that's most important is that we don't have to all agree on the same movie or the same subject matter. There's people that hate this movie. There's people that think this is the best movie ever. I just think that it is a interesting notion that a movie like this is so hard to find and will probably never see the light of day on an upgraded physical release. And it's one of thousands from the 90s that are like this. And it's just a great little reflection piece. So I want to finish the conversation off of this film of like, what were your favorite moments in this movie? I know we might not have liked the movie in the same way, but like things that were either quotables or things that you'll always remember. For me, it's like the scenes I describe to people when I talk about this movie. So I'll go ahead and start with you, Mike.
Jeremy Piven was a highlight for me in the movie, and he was Ari Gold. So again, he's the same guy in everything that he does, and I enjoy it for some reason or another. And the fact that he was a senior for so long is it's not the first time it's been done in a movie. Probably won't be the last either. Oftentimes when like today I went over to the IMDb and I get more out of the IMDb than I did out of the movie. And I found it, and Iris will get a kick out of this. I found it interesting that Hart Bachner directed this. Yeah. If you don't know who he is, he played Ellis in Die Hard.
Hans Bobby.
Yeah. I do $1 million deals every day. I can get this guy for you. Yeah. Also, Iris, get this. Zach Penn wrote this. Yeah, remember Zach Penn from the incident at Loch Ness? Yeah, I was surprised to see that too.
Yeah, so. He wrote a bunch of X-Men movies. He did a great documentary about the E.T. Atari discs that were buried in Arizona or New Mexico. Yeah,
worst video game that ever was made. but overall, it's a silly movie, and I can see where you had growing up with it, seeing it on cable over and over again, it would be close to your heart. But me, someone who was visiting it for the very first time, found it maybe a little too silly, and the college antics weren't something I experienced, and I'm not entirely sure a lot of people experience college this way.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And just the fact that like there's lots of people who will go back to Disneyland after 50 years of not being there and be like, oh my God, I like this place. Like we just grow out of things.
Exactly. Yep.
What about you, Iris?
There are a couple of scenes. The one where he is basically it's Jerry Pevins, and he when he's talking and he is getting the dean fired because he is just blowing
Mhm.
stuff up and people are protesting and everything, and
I think I know what you're talking about.
so
Yeah.
that's what the whooping crane gets released, which is like an endangered species, which I don't know if ever they were, but whatever.
It does have a pretty funny finale. I would have to agree with that.
And of course, just how full circle, the kid who destroyed people's thesis and pissed all kinds of people off that was being run after. Um, then it's the little I think they were the balls and shaft.
Yeah, the balls and shaft fraternity.
That was pretty funny.
How they're running after David Spade and his character. I think that was great. I really enjoyed it, and of course the kid decides that he's going to go to PCU because
Yeah,
why
of
not,
course. Yeah.
right?
He
So
has to.
Why not? You're gonna
Yeah,
go be one
he
of the
has to after
slackers. It'll be a 7-year senior. Sounds like fun to
the
me.
exactly,
it's the best weekend of his
exactly,
life.
because
Right,
when you're a
absolutely.
7-year senior, you don't have to be a responsible adult.
There you go. For me, the moments I'll always remember, number one, the meat tossing out the window on a vegan
Oh, so
protest
good.
is probably one of the hardest chuckles I had when I was a teenager, and I still laugh at it so hard. Like the fact that we've got this peaceful vegan protest and meat is murder, and they've got like the little music going on and everyone's doing their thing, and they throw hundreds of pounds of ground beef and meatballs and steaks on them, and then they're grilling steaks later on in their dorm. Mwah.
That was my favorite scene. In fact, I'm looking at my notes on my phone, and I put 1940 for a reason. That's when it happens. The timestamp 1940, and I was going to go back and watch that. That's my favorite scene.
And it's the meat tossing.
Yeah, it's the meat tossing and the making fun of the vegans, rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Thank you very much. I love the scene, and I quote it all the time, where Jeremy Piven is talking to Jon Favreau to go get beer. And Jon Favreau is saying, man, I can't. I'm going to go see the Melvins with Frog and Toad are friends. And he looks at his shirt. He's like, what are you wearing? You're wearing the shirt of the band that you're going to go see. Don't be that guy. I have lived by that little piece of knowledge my entire life. I've got tons of band shirts. I will never wear a shirt of the band that I'm going to go see, even if I bought it there, because Jeremy Piven told me not to be that guy in 1994. I got more and more moments. We already talked about like all the cast of up and comers and things like that. Like there were a lot of people in this movie that ended up in Favreau's movies in the future because he became friends with them in this. That's really cool. Like the spawns, just like
a lot of big names.
It spawned a lot of big names. And
even Jake Busey, who knew he'd end up in Starship Troopers or
the Frighteners.
Yeah, right.
Or since we're talking about HBO shows, the fact that Matt Ross, who went to go be the villain in Big Love, is one of the nerdy rock and roll band guys who gets zapped. Just I love this movie. I love the cast, and I love that it is a hidden treasure that you talk to people about it, and some of them are like, I don't know what that is. And it's like, well, let me show you. Let me introduce this to you. So, yeah. Great time talking about these movies, guys. Hopefully we get people excited to go and seek them out on their own. They are available streaming online. One of them you have to like look a little bit harder, but you'll find it. But I'm grateful that we have these podcasts, that you guys do what you do, and then I get to do what I do, so we can have conversations like this. Not everyone has to like the movie the same, but the fact that we get excited talking about a movie for the first time. Polite Society was a perfect example. It's just a lot of fun. So I can't thank you enough for joining me.
And so is PCU. I mean, you're showing the world that there's this movie, as you said, that's been quite frankly unknown. No one knows about this movie. Yeah. I'm not going to say no one. There has fans such as yourself, but the ability to talk about something like this on the podcast hopefully will shed light, and hopefully people will find the movie and watch it, because what's it going to hurt? It's 90 minutes of goofiness, right?
They do.
Every movie deserves to be watched, good or bad.
Good or bad. I agree. All right, everyone, where can we find you on the socials so my listeners can go and seek your show out?
Movies in 30 Minutes. That's on Twitter, which is now X, oddly enough. And I guess it's been X for a while, and on Instagram.
And then everyone, you can find links to their show in my Cultworthy Partners page on thecultworthy.com. Mike, Iris, thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to have you back. And anytime you need a third wheel on your show, you know where to reach out, okay?
Thanks for having us, Antonio. Good seeing you again.
Good to see you again. Have a good week, everybody.
You too.
Sweet. Thank you very much.